We're at 40 minutes in, and we are jumping into our biggest topic here, the one that we've been waiting on. So let's jump right into the two quarterback rotation situation. I just like the alliteration of that. My question for you, Jack, after everything that you've seen and after the talent levels on both sides and after the confusion it's going to lead to for the defense, not to mention the defense having to prepare for it regardless of how it's rotated in, do you get the sense or do you suppose that it's going to be more predetermined based upon down and distance, based upon points in the game, or will Shanahan do this a bit more by feel? So the difference being the initial 10 plays of a game are typically scripted, something in that like, and then a play caller generally goes on to playing by feel. And yes, it's dictated by down and distance, but they also go with, well, I have a sense that this play is going to work now based on what the defense is giving me. What's your sense? Will it be more controlled and plotted out going into it, or will it be game flow dictated?
I think that it's going to be a little bit more plotted out in the way that it's going to be. They're going to have packages, obviously, and it's going to be maybe
Right.
like in the red zone situations, or maybe in, uh, you know, second and short kind of a situation. Those kind of things, where they can bring them in, and it gives you the option to where they're keeping the defense off base a little bit. That's why I say the second and short, because that doesn't necessarily mean they're going to have to run it. They can throw it and run. Uh, I think it's going to be a little more dictated than just a flow of the game type of situation.
I tend to think that as well. It's sort of it being a blend of both in the way that you described it, meaning that there are certain game circumstances that will dictate that we put Trey Lance in. And the flow of the game will then dictate how many times we hit those particular game circumstances, right? We may only hit the red zone twice in a game, and the rest could be long touchdowns all day long because, Jimmy throws a nice deep ball. So it could be a lot of deep touchdowns. But it could also be that Shanahan has his eye on those second and short, right? When you put Lance into the game in a short yardage situation, what an impossible task for the defense. The idea of trying to cover all 11 men on the field when you only have a short distance to go in the red zone. I mean, it must be terrifying for teams to have to go up against that, especially when you have two viable quarterbacks and therefore can risk the second quarterback just a little bit more, especially in high pressure situations where the win is on the line, right? You can be a little more careless with Lance because of the fact that he's not going to be starting next week. It's on Jimmy.
Mm-hmm.
I do think that Kyle, what he showed in the preseason could come up. I think you're right that most likely it's going to be dictated by down and distance, situational football, but he is a gifted play caller and does seem to get into the flow of the game. Now, he's not immune to the random brain fart that has happened to him in some notable high pressure situations. But I challenge anyone who's listening, if you haven't been in a high pressure situation, you might just ease up on the criticism a little bit because I think people underestimate the type of pressure that's going on. I play poker randomly on the side and I don't play for big money, but if you get into a pot where there's a lot of money in the middle, your body just acts differently. Your heartbeat is going through the roof. Like it's just a different level of pressure. So all that to say, I think that he is the type of guy that has a good feel for that. I think that he could get into the groove and start to flex Jimmy and Trey in and out a bit like we saw in the preseason. But I think that's got to be in a game where we're pretty much in control.
Yeah, I can see him doing what you're saying because it's a pretty seamless transition between the two. Really, the offense itself doesn't change dramatically in either direction. It's all
Right.
the same. They're running all the same stuff, regardless of who the quarterback is. The only difference is when they run, for example, that outside, the run that they did against a couple times against the Raiders, where, Mostert runs out to the right and beats basically everything about that play is blocked up for the quarterback to keep the ball.
Right.
And it leaves just Mostert one-on-one with the linebacker. So that's a play that with they run regardless. But if you put Trey Lance in the game, all of a sudden now he keeps the ball and he can run it for 10 or 15 yards right up the gut, and it's a huge play. And there's no change for anybody on the field. The only difference is a little bit different cadence from the two,
That
and
is
the sound.
that is the beauty of the Shanahan offense, being able to run multiple looks out of the same set and to bring in a completely different weapon with a completely different skill set that allows them to flex in different ways with a various quarterback behind center. It certainly sets up for Shanahan feeling himself and really just going with the flow of the game. But only time will tell, right? What is your guesstimate of how many plays we'll see Lance this Sunday?
If he plays, I think we see him for less than 10. That's my
Less than
guess.
10.
Yeah, that would be my guess.
Do you anticipate the vast majority of those coming in goal line and short yardage situations?
Uh, that's kind of what my thought would be, is more toward,
Mm-hmm.
like I said, it's either going to be in that red zone situation or second and short type of situations in the middle of the field, something along those lines. It's interesting when you talk about it, because after the Raiders game, when they were asking about it, Lance mentioned that it was personnel driven. And so maybe it is just where they just go with the flow, just depending on what the personnel is. That's when he goes into the game.
Personnel driven, meaning when a particular substitution package for the 49ers goes in, or driven by the personnel on the defensive side of the ball and how Shanahan reacts to that.
The 49ers offensive personnel grouping.
So that brought him in for various plays.
Yeah, and watching it, it looks like he's coming on the field with mostly 11 personnel when they're taking out Kyle Shanahan, and they're running 11 personnel. That's him coming into the game. At least that's how it was against the Raiders from my eye when I watched it.
That's interesting. Do you see any logical reason for that? Why you wouldn't see Juice playing a bit more with Trey? I would think that a power package like that could be a great goal line package.
It seemed like they were using, at least from little bits of, because they didn't do it a lot. So it looked like they had on a couple of the times it looked like there was a fullback in there, but it was actually the tight end that was back there. It was Kittle that was back there with them. So they can get into multiple looks out of it, and they can really. Part of the cool part about it is you can spread the defense out, and then that opens up a lot of running lanes and blocking lanes, because they can get out there with Kittle, move him around, and it's very similar to their 21 personnel anyway.
Yeah, it is wild how interchangeable a lot of the pieces on this offense are. And I suppose that has been intentional through the building that Kyle and Lynch have done on the roster. But the size and speed that they have at most of these skill positions on the offense really excite me for what this offense could look like and what direction it could go. To your point that out of the same formation, it could really be a power run type of offense, or it can be take the top off type of a throwing offense.
Yeah, that's what. Well, I like the fact that they can put, if they have Juszczyk and Kittle on the field at the same time, or let's say they throw out Ross Dwelly as well. So you have Ross Dwelly, George Kittle, Kyle Juszczyk. So you got a 22 personnel look. That brings the defense bringing in, maybe the run heavy, to match up. But then you can go to line of scrimmage, and with a couple of motions, all of a sudden you're in 11 personnel, because Kittle has the ability. Kittle and Dwelly both have the ability to line up as receivers, and so does Juszczyk. So where do you go? That's kind of the fun part about this offense.
Such a nightmare just looking at it from that perspective. That's crazy.